Have you ever stood at the edge of a tall building, feeling perfectly safe behind the protective barriers, when suddenly your mind whispered something terrifying? What if I just stepped forward? That fleeting moment when your rational brain battles an inexplicable urge to do something catastrophically dangerous, despite having absolutely no desire to harm yourself, reveals one of the most unsettling truths about human consciousness. We are far less in command of our own thoughts than we'd like to believe. This phenomenon isn't your imagination running wild, nor is it a sign of mental instability. It's a surprisingly common experience that psychologists have studied extensively, philosophers have pondered for centuries, and researchers continue to investigate today. The French have a particularly elegant term for it, l'appel du vide, literally translating to the call of the void. This mysterious psychological experience forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: if we can't predict or control these sudden intrusive thoughts, how much control do we actually have over our own minds? Picture yourself driving down a familiar highway on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The radio plays softly, traffic flows smoothly, and your mind wanders pleasant thoughts about dinner plans or weekend activities. Then, without any warning or logical trigger, your brain presents you with a vivid, terrifying scenario. What would happen if you simply turned the steering wheel sharply to the left, directly into oncoming traffic? The thought arrives unbidden and unwelcome, lasting perhaps only a fraction of a second before your conscious mind rejects it completely. You shake your head, grip the wheel a little tighter, and continue driving safely to your destination. But something has shifted. For that brief moment, you experience the unsettling realization that thoughts can emerge from somewhere deep within your psyche, without your permission or understanding. This experience extends far beyond driving scenarios. Parents have reported sudden, horrifying mental images of accidentally dropping their babies. People standing on subway platforms have described fighting unexpected urges to step in front of approaching trains. Individuals using sharp knives in the kitchen have experienced flashes of fear about losing control and causing harm to themselves or others nearby. What makes these experiences particularly disturbing isn't their content alone, but rather their apparent randomness and the way they seem to come from some unknown part of ourselves. They feel simultaneously foreign and familiar, like hearing your own voice saying words you never intended to speak. Research into this phenomenon has revealed fascinating insights about how common these experiences actually are. Dr. Jennifer Hames and her colleagues at Florida State University conducted groundbreaking research in 2011, surveying over 400 participants about their experiences with what researchers call high place phenomenon, the specific version of intrusive thoughts that occurs when someone is in an elevated location. Their findings were remarkable. Approximately 1/3 of participants reported experiencing this phenomenon, with many describing it in strikingly similar terms. Participants described feeling sudden anxiety while standing near the edge of a high place, but not because they feared falling accidentally. Instead, they worried that some part of their mind might override their conscious intentions and compel them to jump. Subsequent studies have suggested that when researchers broaden their definition to include various forms of intrusive thoughts, the numbers climb even higher. Some research indicates that over half of all people have experienced at least some version of these unwelcome mental intrusions, suggesting that far from being rare psychological anomalies, they represent a nearly universal aspect of human consciousness. But what exactly causes these thoughts to surface? The scientific community has proposed several compelling explanations, each offering a different lens through which to understand this puzzling aspect of human psychology. One explanation suggests that these intrusive thoughts stem from our inherently curious nature. Human beings possess an almost insatiable appetite for understanding and experiencing the unknown, even when that unknown involves potentially dangerous or harmful scenarios. This same curiosity drives us to watch horror movies, read true crime stories, and seek out thrilling experiences that simulate danger without actual risk. Consider how children naturally gravitate toward forbidden or dangerous situations. Despite being warned repeatedly about hot stoves, many children still feel compelled to test the boundaries, driven by an irresistible need to understand what hot actually means through direct experience. Similarly, when we're told not to touch electrical outlets or walk too close to the edge of a cliff, part of our brain becomes intensely curious about what would happen if we ignored those warnings. This theory proposes that intrusive thoughts represent our mind's attempt to simulate extreme scenarios, allowing us to explore dangerous possibilities safely within the confines of our imagination. The problem arises when we misinterpret these mental simulations as genuine desires or urges, creating anxiety about our own psychological stability. From this perspective, the call of the void becomes less mysterious and more relatable. It's simply our brain's way of satisfying its morbid curiosity about extreme experiences we would never actually pursue. The thought, "What if I jumped?" becomes equivalent to wondering, "What would that feel like?" rather than expressing any genuine desire to harm ourselves. Dr. Haynes and her research team proposed a different explanation that focuses on how our survival instincts might create these confusing experiences. According to their theory, the high place phenomenon results from a misunderstanding between different parts of our brain's threat detection system. When we stand near the edge of a tall building or cliff, our unconscious mind immediately recognizes the potential danger and activates various safety protocols. These might include heightened awareness of our balance and positioning, increased attention to potential hazards, vivid mental imagery of possible negative outcomes, and subtle physical adjustments to move us away from the edge. The problem occurs when our conscious mind tries to interpret these automatic safety responses. Instead of recognizing them as protective mechanisms designed to keep us safe, our rational brain might mischaracterize the vivid mental imagery and physical sensations as evidence that some part of us wants to jump. This explanation suggests that the call of the void isn't actually a call at all. It's more like an overly cautious security guard that we've misunderstood as a saboteur. Our brain is working overtime to protect us from danger, but the very intensity of those protective measures creates confusion about our own motivations and desires. Philosophical traditions, particularly existentialism, offer a radically different interpretation of these experiences. Thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard and Jean Paul Sartre viewed the call of the void not as a psychological quirk or misinterpretation, but as a profound encounter with the fundamental nature of human existence. Sartre described this experience as the vertigo of possibility, arguing that the anxiety we feel while standing on the edge of a cliff stems from our sudden visceral realization of our absolute freedom to choose. In that moment, we become acutely aware that nothing except our own will prevents us from taking that final step. This realization can be overwhelming because it forces us to confront the enormous responsibility that comes with complete freedom of choice. Kierkegaard famously wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, capturing the disorienting effect of recognizing our unlimited capacity to choose our actions, even when those choices might be destructive or irrational. According to existentialist philosophy, we are condemned to be free because we cannot escape the burden of constant decision-making, and every choice we make reflects our values and defines who we are as individuals. From this perspective, the call of the void represents a moment of existential clarity, a brief but intense encounter with the weight of our own freedom and responsibility. The anxiety we feel isn't about the possibility of falling or jumping, it's about recognizing that our choices and our choices alone determine our fate. However, we might consider an alternative interpretation that directly challenges the existentialist view. Rather than representing our encounter with ultimate freedom, perhaps the call of the void reveals our fundamental lack of control over our own thoughts and impulses. Most of the time, we operate under the comfortable illusion that we are the authors of our own thoughts, the directors of our own mental processes. We believe we consciously choose what to think about, when to feel certain emotions, and how to respond to various situations. But intrusive thoughts shatter this illusion by demonstrating that mental content can appear in our consciousness without our invitation or approval. If we truly controlled our own minds, wouldn't we be able to prevent unwelcome thoughts from arising in the first place? The fact that we can't suggests that much of our mental life occurs through processes beyond our conscious awareness or control. Our thoughts, emotions, and even our desires might be the products of countless factors: genetic predispositions, environmental influences, unconscious associations, neurochemical fluctuations that operate entirely outside our conscious influence. From this deterministic perspective, the call of the void becomes particularly unsettling because it forces us to confront the possibility that we are not the masters of our own minds, but rather passengers in a vehicle driven by forces we don't understand and can't control. The anxiety stems not from having too much freedom, but from recognizing how little freedom we actually possess. Modern neuroscience offers additional insights into these experiences by examining the brain mechanisms that might produce intrusive thoughts. Research has identified several brain networks that contribute to thought generation, emotional regulation, and behavioral control, and dysfunction in any of these systems can lead to unwanted mental intrusions. The default mode network, which becomes active when our minds wander, sometimes generates random thoughts and scenarios that our executive control systems must then evaluate and potentially suppress. When this suppression process doesn't work perfectly, we become consciously aware of thoughts that would normally remain below the threshold of awareness. Additionally, the brain's threat detection systems are constantly scanning for potential dangers and generating what-if scenarios to help us prepare for various possibilities. Most of these mental simulations occur unconsciously, but occasionally they break through into conscious awareness, creating the experience of having dangerous or disturbing thoughts that seem to come from nowhere. Understanding these mechanisms doesn't necessarily make intrusive thoughts less unsettling, but it does help normalize them as natural byproducts of how our brains process information and maintain our safety. Rather than indicating psychological problems or hidden desires, they might simply reflect the occasional glitches that occur in any complex information processing system. Regardless of which explanation resonates most strongly with you, the experience of intrusive thoughts leaves most people with a lingering sense of uncertainty about their own minds. Once you've had the thought, "What if I just stepped off this ledge?" it becomes difficult to forget that such thoughts can emerge unexpectedly from the depths of your own consciousness. This uncertainty can be deeply unsettling, but it might also be valuable. Recognizing the limitations of our self-knowledge and self-control can lead to greater humility, empathy, and wisdom. If we can't fully predict or control our own thoughts and impulses, perhaps we should be more understanding when others struggle with similar challenges. The call of the void also serves as a reminder that consciousness itself remains largely mysterious. Despite centuries of philosophical inquiry and decades of scientific research, we still don't fully understand how thoughts arise, why some thoughts feel more ours than others, or what it means to have conscious control over our mental processes. These experiences raise profound questions about personal responsibility, free will, and the nature of self. If we can't control all of our thoughts, how accountable are we for our mental content? If intrusive thoughts can arise without our permission, what does that mean for our understanding of criminal responsibility or moral judgment? Some argue that recognizing the involuntary nature of many thoughts should lead to greater compassion and more sophisticated approaches to mental health treatment. Rather than judging people harshly for having unwanted thoughts, we might focus on helping them develop better strategies for managing and responding to these inevitable mental intrusions. Others worry that acknowledging our limited control over our own minds might undermine important concepts like personal responsibility and moral agency. If we're not fully in control of our thoughts and impulses, how can we hold anyone accountable for their actions? Perhaps the most balanced approach involves accepting both our capabilities and limitations with equal honesty. We do have significant influence over our actions, even if we can't completely control our thoughts. We can develop skills for managing intrusive thoughts, even if we can't prevent them entirely. We can cultivate wisdom about our own psychological processes, even if we can't achieve perfect self-knowledge. The call of the void, rather than being simply a curiosity or a problem to be solved, might be better understood as an invitation to deeper self-awareness and humility. It reminds us that human consciousness is far more complex and mysterious than our everyday experience suggests, and that true wisdom involves acknowledging what we don't know about ourselves as much as celebrating what we do know. Understanding the nature of intrusive thoughts can have practical benefits for how we navigate our daily lives. When unwelcome thoughts arise, we can remind ourselves that having a thought doesn't mean we want to act on it, that these experiences are normal and common rather than signs of psychological instability, and that we can observe these thoughts without identifying with them or allowing them to define us. Many people find it helpful to develop a kind of psychological distance from their thoughts, recognizing that thoughts are mental events that come and go, rather than essential aspects of their identity. This perspective can reduce the anxiety and self-judgment that often accompany intrusive thoughts, making them easier to manage and less likely to interfere with daily functioning. The call of the void, in all its mysterious and unsettling glory, ultimately serves as a powerful reminder of the complexity and wonder of human consciousness. While we may never fully understand why these thoughts arise or what they mean, we can learn to coexist with the uncertainty they represent, finding wisdom in acknowledging the limits of our self-knowledge and control. In embracing this uncertainty, we might discover that the void that calls to us isn't external. It's the unknown depths of our own minds, forever mysterious and forever worthy of our curious, humble attention.